I didn't notice it the first time because nothing actually happened. That's the part that still bothers me the most. If something had opened or slammed or even creaked, I would have remembered. There would have been a moment to point to, a clear beginning. Instead, it started with something so small, so forgettable, that I almost convinced myself it never happened at all. It was a Tuesday night. I remember that because I had work early the next morning, and I'd gone to bed annoyed, already dreading the alarm. My apartment was quiet in that heavy, late-night way where even the refrigerator seems to hold its breath. No traffic outside, no neighbors moving around, just that kind of silence that presses in on your ears. I woke up suddenly like I'd been pulled out of sleep. No nightmare, no noise, just awake. For a few seconds, I didn't move. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what had dragged me out of sleep so cleanly. My heart wasn't racing. My breathing was normal. Everything felt wrong, but not in a way I could explain. That's when I checked the time, 3:07 a.m. I remember squinting at my phone, waiting for my eyes to adjust. 3:07 exactly, not 3:06, not 3:08. That number stuck in my head for some reason, like it mattered more than it should have. I almost rolled over and went back to sleep. Almost. Because that's when I heard it. A soft, mechanical click. It came from the front door. Now I live alone. No roommates, no pets, nothing that could have made that sound. And it wasn't loud, not dramatic like in movies. It was quiet, subtle, the kind of sound you only notice if you're already listening. But I heard it, clear as anything. Click. I sat up slowly, every movement feeling louder than it should have been. My apartment is small, so from my bedroom I can see straight down the short hallway to the front door. It was closed, locked, as far as I knew. Nothing looked out of place. I told myself it was nothing. Pipes, old building, maybe the neighbor across the hall. There are 100 normal explanations for a sound like that at night, and I went through all of them in about 5 seconds. Still, I kept staring at the door, waiting. Nothing happened. No footsteps, no movement, no second sound. Eventually, I lay back down, forcing myself to relax. I remember pulling the blanket up a little higher, like that would somehow make a difference. My eyes stayed open longer than I'd like to admit, fixed on that dark hallway, but nothing else happened. And eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, everything felt normal again. Sunlight coming through the blinds, the usual sounds from outside, cars, people, life. It was almost enough to make the whole thing feel stupid. I even laughed at myself while making coffee. "Great," I said out loud. "Jumping at ghosts now." I grabbed my keys, headed for the door, and reached for the lock. That's when I paused, because the deadbolt was already unlocked. I stood there for a second just staring at it. Now I lock my door every night. Not sometimes, not usually, every single night. It's a habit. I check it before bed, sometimes twice. I live in a decent area, but I've never been comfortable leaving it unsecured. So seeing it unlocked, that didn't sit right. My first thought was that I'd forgotten. Simple as that. People forget things all the time. Locks, stoves, lights. It happens. But I didn't feel like I'd forgotten. I felt like I would have remembered. Still, I shrugged it off, locked the door behind me, went to work, and by the time lunch rolled around, I'd mostly stopped thinking about it. Mostly. That night, though, I made a point of checking the door. Twice. I remember standing there, hand on the deadbolt, turning it firmly until I felt it catch. Then I tested it, pulling gently to make sure it was secure. Locked. No question about it. I even said it out loud, half joking, half serious. Locked. Like I was trying to convince myself. The rest of the night was uneventful. I watched some TV, scrolled on my phone, and eventually went to bed a little after midnight. Nothing felt off. No strange sounds. No weird tension in the air. Just a normal night. Until it wasn't. I woke up again, same way as before. No dream, no noise. just suddenly awake. And before I even checked the time, I already knew what it was going to say. 3:07 a.m. Exactly. That uneasy feeling crept in faster this time, like my body remembered before my mind caught up. I didn't move right away. I just listened. Silence. Deep, heavy silence. Then, click, the sound came again, soft, precise, unmistakable, from the front door. I felt something cold settle in my chest, because once is nothing, twice is a pattern, and patterns mean something. I sat up slowly, eyes fixed on the hallway. The door looked the same as before, closed, still harmless, but I knew what I'd heard, and this time I couldn't brush it off. I stayed there for a long time, just watching, waiting for something else to happen. But like the night before, nothing did. No footsteps, no movement, no second sound, just that one quiet click. Eventually exhaustion won out. I lay back down, though I don't think I ever fully fell asleep again. When morning came, I didn't feel rested. I felt tense, uneasy, and already a little afraid of what I might find. I got out of bed, walked down the hallway, and stopped in front of the door. For a moment I just stood there, then I reached out and touched the lock. Unlocked again. I didn't go to work that day. I told myself I was just being cautious, that it made sense to stay home and figure out what was going on instead of pretending everything was normal. But the truth is, I didn't want to leave the apartment. Not after seeing that lock open again. It's strange how quickly your sense of safety can collapse. 2 nights ago, this place felt like mine. Small, a little cramped maybe, but safe. Predictable. Now every corner felt like it was hiding something I couldn't see. I checked the door 3 times that morning, each time the same result. The deadbolt turned smoothly, no resistance, no sign of damage. The latch worked perfectly. There were no scratches around the frame, no indication that someone had forced their way in. If someone was unlocking it, they were doing it cleanly, which didn't make me feel better, it made it worse, because that meant either I was losing my mind or someone else had a way inside. Around noon, I called my landlord. He's the kind of guy who answers everything like it's an inconvenience, like the world is constantly interrupting something more important he could be doing. I explained the situation as calmly as I could, leaving out the part about the exact time and the pattern. I told him I thought there might be an issue with the lock. He sighed. Locks don't just unlock themselves, he said. I know, I replied. That's why I'm calling. There was a pause on the line, like he was deciding how much effort I was worth. I can come by tomorrow, he said finally. Tomorrow, I repeated. It's not an emergency, he said. You're not locked out, are you? No, I wasn't locked out. That almost made me laugh. Fine, I said. Tomorrow's fine. We hung up, and I stood there in the middle of my living room, phone still in my hand, feeling like I'd just made a mistake, because deep down I knew waiting wasn't a good idea. That night, I made a decision. If something was happening at 3:07, I was going to be awake for it. No guessing, no half-asleep confusion. I wanted to hear it clearly, see it if I could. I set an alarm for 3:05 a.m. The hours leading up to it dragged. I tried to distract myself with TV, with my phone, with anything that would keep my mind from circling back to that door. Every now and then I'd glance down the hallway just to make sure it was still closed, still normal, still just a door. Around 2:30, I turned everything off and sat in the dark. It felt wrong to have lights on, like whatever was happening preferred it that way. I sat on the edge of my bed, fully awake, watching the faint outline of the hallway. The apartment seemed quieter than usual, like even the building itself was waiting. 2:58, 3:01, 3:04. My alarm never got the chance to go off, because at exactly 3:07, it happened again. Click! But this time, I saw it. The handle didn't turn. The door didn't swing open. Nothing dramatic like that. But the deadbolt, it moved. Just slightly. A small, precise shift, like something on the other side had turned it with careful, deliberate pressure. My stomach dropped. I don't think I breathed. There was no one there, at least no one I could see. The hallway was empty. The door remained closed. But I had just watched the lock disengage on its own. Slowly, quietly, the deadbolt slid back into the unlocked position. And then, nothing. No footsteps, no attempt to open the door, just silence. That was worse than anything, because if someone had been trying to get in, they would have opened it, right? Unless they didn't need to. I don't remember deciding to move, but suddenly I was standing in the hallway, staring at the door from only a few feet away. My heart was pounding now, loud enough that it felt like it should echo. I reached out, hesitated, then grabbed the handle, cold. I turned it slowly and pulled the door open. The hallway outside was empty, dimly lit, the same as always. The same worn carpet, the same scuffed walls, no footsteps retreating, no shadow slipping around a corner, nothing. I stepped out, looking both directions, still nothing. But as I stood there, something felt off. Not in the hallway, in me, like I had just done something I wasn't supposed to do. I backed into my apartment and shut the door quickly, locking it again without thinking. This time, I didn't just check it. I leaned against it like my weight could somehow reinforce the lock. I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. Morning came slowly, and with it, that fragile sense of normalcy tried to return again. Sunlight, noise, routine. But it didn't stick this time because now I had seen it. This wasn't forgetfulness. This wasn't a faulty lock. Something was unlocking my door from the outside and choosing not to come in. The landlord showed up around noon, just like he said he would. He checked the lock, the frame, even swapped out the deadbolt entirely with a new one from his truck. The whole time, he kept giving me these sideways looks, like he was trying to decide if I was worth humoring or if I was just another paranoid tenant. "It's solid," he said, finally testing the new lock. "Nobody's getting through that without a key." I nodded. "Good," I said. But I didn't feel any better, because that wasn't the problem. That night, I locked the new deadbolt, and for the first time, I added something else. A chair, wedged under the handle, angled tight against the floor. It wasn't much, but it was something. Something physical, something I could see, something that shouldn't move on its own. I went to bed fully dressed, and I didn't bother setting an alarm because I already knew 3:07 was coming. I must have dozed off at some point because the next thing I remember is that same sudden awareness snapping me awake. No dream, no sound, just that feeling, like something had arrived. I didn't need to check the time, I already knew. Still, I turned my head slowly toward the nightstand and glanced at my phone. 3:07 a.m. Right on time. My eyes moved immediately to the hallway. The door was still there, closed. The chair was still wedged tightly under the handle, exactly where I had placed it. For a brief, fragile moment, I felt relief. Maybe that was it. Maybe whatever had been happening couldn't get through now. Maybe it needed the lock alone, and the added barrier was enough to stop it. Maybe... Click. The sound was sharper, this time closer. I saw the deadbolt turn. Even with the brand new lock, even with everything replaced, it slid back just as smoothly as before. Slow, careful, controlled, unlocked. But the door didn't open. The chair didn't move. Nothing else happened. And then, after a few seconds that stretched far too long, the handle twitched just slightly. The chair creaked. I felt my entire body lock up. The pressure against the handle increased, slow and steady, like something on the other side was testing it, not forcing it, not trying to break it, just checking. The chair shifted a fraction of an inch, wood scraping softly against the floor. Then it stopped. Silence filled the apartment again, thick and suffocating. I waited 1 second, 5, 10, then... a soft, almost thoughtful jiggle of the handle, like whoever or whatever was out there had just realized something. The chair held, the door stayed shut. But that's when I understood something that made my stomach drop. It hadn't tried to push past the chair. It hadn't even really tried to open the door. It had just tested it, like it was learning. The pressure disappeared, the handle went still, and for a long time, nothing happened. I stayed frozen in bed, barely breathing, staring at the hallway like if I looked away for even a second, I'd miss something important. Minutes passed, or maybe it was longer. Time didn't feel right anymore. Eventually, I forced myself to move. Slowly, carefully, I got out of bed and stepped into the hallway. Each step felt too loud, even though I was barely making a sound. I stopped a few feet from the door. The chair was still in place. Everything looked normal, too normal. I leaned down and gripped the back of the chair, hesitating for a moment before pulling it away. The handle didn't move. Nothing reacted. I swallowed and reached for the lock. Still unlocked. Of course it was. I don't know why I expected anything different. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at the door, my hand hovering inches away from the knob. Every instinct told me not to open it, that whatever was happening, whatever was on the other side at 3:07, I didn't want to see it. But another part of me, the same part that had opened it the night before, needed to know. Slowly, I turned the handle and pulled the door open. The hallway was empty again, but this time I noticed something I hadn't before. The air felt different, cooler, not like a draft, not like a window had been left open, more like the temperature dropped just outside my apartment and nowhere else. I stepped out just a little, looked left, looked right, nothing. No movement, no sound. But then I looked down and my stomach turned. There were marks on the carpet, faint, subtle, but definitely there, like something heavy had been dragged right up to my door, not away from it, not past it, to it. The fibers of the carpet were pressed in uneven lines, forming a path that stopped exactly at my threshold. I followed the marks with my eyes, tracing them down the hallway. They didn't go very far, just a few feet, and then they stopped. Like whatever had made them had simply vanished. I backed into my apartment slowly, my mind racing, trying to make sense of something that didn't make sense. Because there's only so many explanations for marks like that, and none of them are good. I shut the door and locked it again, this time adding the chair back into place with shaking hands. Sleep wasn't even an option anymore. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the floor, staring at the door, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. Morning came, and with it, a decision. I couldn't stay there anymore. Whatever this was, it wasn't stopping. If anything, it was getting closer, learning, adapting. The thought of another night, another 3:07, was enough to make my chest tighten. So I packed a bag, just the essentials. Clothes, charger, a few important documents. I told Pulf I'd stay somewhere else for a few days. A hotel maybe, a friend's place. Anywhere but here, anywhere but that door. I left just after noon. And for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. Distance does that. It makes things feel smaller, less real. By the time evening rolled around, I had almost convinced myself I'd overreacted. Almost. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello? There was a pause, static, then a soft, familiar sound. Click. My blood ran cold because I knew that sound, and it wasn't coming from my apartment anymore. I pulled the phone away from my ear like it had burned me. For a second, I just stared at it, my reflection faint in the black glass of the screen. The call was still connected. The timer was still moving. 0007, 0008, 0009. I forced myself to bring it back to my ear. Hello, I said again, quieter this time. Nothing. No breathing, no voice, just silence. Then, click. The line went dead. I didn't move for a while after that. I just sat on the edge of the hotel bed, phone in my hand, staring at nothing. The room felt too still, too quiet, like the silence had followed me here. I told myself it was a coincidence. It had to be. Phones glitch, calls drop. People dial wrong numbers, and sounds can resemble other sounds. That didn't mean anything. It didn't mean it followed me. It didn't mean anything new. Where I was. I repeated that to myself until it almost sounded true. Almost. I didn't sleep much that night. Every little noise pulled me back to full awareness. The hum of the air conditioner, footsteps in the hallway outside, a door closing somewhere down the corridor. Normal hotel sounds, the kind you'd usually ignore. But not that night. That night, everything felt like a warning. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke up again. Suddenly, completely, the same way I had in my apartment, that same unnatural awareness, like something had reached in and flipped a switch. My heart was already racing before I even looked at the clock. Slowly, I turned my head. The digital display on the nightstand glowed in the dark. 3:07 a.m. No, I whispered. My voice sounded small in the room. Wrong. This wasn't supposed to happen here. I wasn't there anymore. I wasn't near that door. I sat up, scanning the room. The hotel door was closed, locked. I had checked it twice before going to bed, just like always. Everything looked normal. Everything was normal. Then I heard it, not from the door, from much closer. Click, right beside me. I froze. My eyes moved slowly toward the sound, toward the nightstand, toward my phone. The screen lit up. No notification, no call, just on. And as I watched, unable to move, the screen flickered once, twice, then went black again. The room felt colder, not dramatically, just enough to notice, enough to make the hairs on my arms stand up. I grabbed the phone, my hands shaking, and checked the screen. No missed calls, no notifications, nothing but I knew what I'd heard, and I knew what time it was. "It's not the door," I said out loud, the realization settling in like something heavy. It was never the door. That had just been the first place it tried, or the easiest. Something in the room creaked softly. I looked up. The hotel door. The handle moved. Just a little. My chest tightened. "No!" I said again, louder this time. The handle twitched once more, then stopped. And just like before, it didn't try to come in. It just tested it. A slow, deliberate rattle. A pause, then stillness. I stared at it, barely breathing, waiting for more, but nothing came. Minutes passed, or maybe longer. Eventually, the tension in the room began to ease just slightly, enough for me to move, enough for me to think. I got out of bed slowly, never taking my eyes off the door, and backed away until I felt the wall behind me. Distance didn't help. Nothing helped, because the pattern was still then 3:07, the click, the test. It didn't matter where I went. It knew where I was, or it didn't need to. The thought came quietly, but once it did, I couldn't ignore it. What if it wasn't following me? What if it was waiting for me? I didn't go back to sleep. I couldn't. I sat there until morning, watching the door, watching the clock, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did, but that didn't make it better. Morning just meant I had more time to think. And the more I thought about it, the worse it got. Because whatever this was, it wasn't random. It wasn't a broken lock. It wasn't someone trying to break in. It had a routine, a method, and now it had me. I checked out of the hotel early, didn't even bother explaining. Where was I supposed to go? Home wasn't safe. The hotel wasn't safe. Anywhere with a door. I stopped that thought before it could finish, because I already knew where it led. I ended up driving for a while, no destination, just moving, like distance might still matter, like it might still help. It didn't, because when night came again, I found myself sitting in my car, parked in an empty lot, staring at the dashboard clock. 3:06. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. I didn't want to look, but I did. 3:07. For a moment, nothing happened, and I felt something fragile flicker in my chest. Relief. Hope. Maybe it was over. Maybe... Click. The sound came from inside the car. Sharp, close, final. I looked down slowly at the door beside me, at the lock, and watched, helpless, as it slid open on its own.